There's the business, which is the creative work that you do. And there's the business of the business, which are the taxes, which are the invoicing, which are the systems you have in place. A lot of stuff that I coach about. Those things are so important. If you don't have the business and the business together, you're not gonna be able to survive to actually do the creative work that you wanna do. My name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My main thing is help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. Today we're gonna talk about contracts. They can be pretty boring. I personally love contracts. I took a couple of law classes when I got my journalism degrees. I found it fascinating. And that's one of the reasons why I became a coach, because we end up working with what's called intellectual property, or IP. And that ends up being what we create and how much we're able to own of it, if we own any of it at all. There's been so many people in rap culture. I've heard about a lot of them lately. There's been people in the artist community as far as fine art, where particularly lately in 2022, I was talking to a friend about this, but we're still not reading contracts. And there are people that are doing killer, amazing work, but their contracts are wrong. Again, that's a big part of the coaching that I do, is helping folks like yourself get their contracts straight. Now, I am not a lawyer. I took a couple of law classes, but I am not a lawyer. But I do understand how to hold on to intellectual property, how to think about intellectual property, and most importantly, how to help you value your intellectual property. So today we're going to talk about 3 big red flags that you want to look into before you sign any type of contract, whether you're an independent creator like myself, or even if you're signing up for a job. Again, my name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. You're watching the Bring Your Worth show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. If you're liking this kind of content about passive income, about creating your worth or building your worth, or even showing up in the way that you want to show up in your career and in your work, be sure and subscribe. It's always free. And share it with people that you like, even like the video if you're feeling it. All right. So again, I am not a lawyer. You better call Saul. You better not call me. Be sure and get legal advice if you're getting into really big contracts. I have a couple lawyers that I've worked with, even though I know law fairly well when it comes to intellectual property, but I still need help and support. And I want to share some of that wisdom with you so you can at least get started with thinking about this process. All right, so when you're looking at a contract, the number one red flag, or one of the 3 red flags, I should say, is something that's called a work for hire. The work for hire is literally what it sounds like. You're working for someone for hire. It's the equivalent of getting hired for something and then not owning what you're actually doing. It's equivalent of you going into someone's house and helping them with their plumbing. You don't own a piece of the house, right? You're not gonna live in the house after the plumbing's done. No, you're gonna go ahead and use the plunger, do the Roto-Rooter thing, take the snake, which if you're a homeowner, you know exactly what the snake is. You're gonna fix it, you're gonna get paid for it, hopefully, and then you'll never talk again. You don't own any piece of it. That's what work for hire means. Someone's hiring you to create something. Now, if you're creating a book, a piece of music, an article, even something that's even more complex than that, if you sign something that says work for hire, that means you have no legal rights to whatever you're creating. Now, there's a few things that you can deal with work for hire. The first approach, if you see someone that's asking you to do a work for hire, is to not do it. Now, to not do it or to refuse to do it, you need to figure out if you're actually going to be doing something else with the work. Now, I have several passive income streams. I have a whole litany. I think litany is the word. You would think I wasn't a journalist, but I actually am. I have a whole litany of videos related to passive income. I'll be sure and put a link in the show notes. But my passive income comes from me knowing 5, even 10 years ago, that some of the work I would be creating, I'd be able to repurpose for something else. For instance, I have a column with Inc. magazine at inkdamonbrown.com. When I did the column, I started like 6 years ago with Inc. I negotiated the contract, or at least made sure the contract was clear, so that they would understand that once I created a column for them, I could actually use it for other purposes. A lot of those columns became the genesis of the Bite-Sized Entrepreneur. I have Ultimate Bite-Sized Entrepreneur, but the original Bite-Sized Entrepreneur became a bestseller about 2 years after I started the Inc. column. So if I didn't negotiate that contract and have that vision and say, the stuff I'm writing for Inc. might have another purpose, then this major passive income stream, and in fact, the beginning of my book imprint, Bring Your Worth, would never have happened. If it did happen, it wouldn't be with that same content. So me talking with Ink, I knew a few years later I might be doing something else with the content. So I made sure it wasn't a work for hire. The second way you can deal with a work for hire is to make it a short-term or short-run ownership. For instance, if you're working with a company or organization, you might say you have exclusive rights. That's the term. You have exclusive rights to whatever I'm creating. But after 6 months, you can hold on to some of those rights and I can actually go and use it somewhere else. Again, this becomes really useful if you're a journalist. If you're creating a piece of music, it might be exclusive for a particular movie, for say that run of the movie. But as soon as the movie's out of the theaters or out from Netflix, whatever, maybe you get the rights back and it can be put somewhere else. That could be a middle ground. The last way you can work with a work for hire is actually lean into it, but actually ask for more. I actually wrote for a major publication and they said there was no way I can get out of the work for hire. In other words, whatever work I was doing for them, they would own it forever. It's called in perpetuity. See, I can't even say the word. That means forever. So we will own this forever. There was no way I could negotiate my way out of it. Instead though, I said, listen, this work is valuable. Y'all are asking me to write for you, so I have a certain expertise. If you want to hold on to this work, you got to pay me more. And they agreed. So I'm being paid, I want to say about 50% more than what they were actually saying in the first place. So they kept the work and I was able to pay a lot more of my rent. So there's ways you can negotiate with the work for hire, but you do not just want to sign it. Second red flag when it comes to contracts is no set payment date. Now, a lot of us get excited, particularly when we start off and we look immediately at how much we're being paid. Oh my gosh, you're being paid $1,000 for doing often the work that we love. And we're like, yes, $1,000, that's fantastic. Where do I sign up? What we often forget is when we're going to get paid. Because they can promise $1,000, but if it's not going to come for a year, then it's not going to matter, particularly, again, we have rent due. And so there's a couple ways that you can deal with if there's no set way as far as knowing when you're going to be paid. The first way is to give pushback and say, what is the net? Net is the average amount of time that you can expect to get paid for, or actually the set amount of time, I should say. So if someone says net 30, then that means within 30 days, you should get a check, 30 days after you invoice them. So push for the net. You can ask the accounts payable people, they're called AP. You can ask the organization or the people that you're working for directly, if you're working directly with a creator, and say, hey, what's the net on this? They will understand. The second way to deal with it, if there's no set pay date, is to ask for part of it in advance. Now, I've asked this for like my bigger projects, but even some of my smaller projects, where I say, hey, if you want me to get involved with this, then why don't you go and give me half up front, and that'll keep both of us honest. I have the half, I can get started on the work, and when the work is done, complete, accepted, then I can get the other half of it. So we both have skin in the game. What you don't want is to be creating something or to be building something, and then you might get paid in often the distant future, or worst case scenario, which I've been in several times over my decades as a freelancer, you don't get paid at all. That sucks. Your time is your money. You're running a business. As I say all the time, there's the business, which is the creative work that you do, and there's the business of the business, which are the taxes, which are the invoicing, which are the systems you have in place, a lot of the stuff that I coach about. Those things are so important. If you don't have the business and the business together, you're not gonna be able to survive to actually do the creative work that you wanna do. And we want you to survive, right? So number two, you can go ahead and get part of it in advance. If there's no set pay date or if things feel a little bit vague, finally, you can ask to get paid up front. But when you get asked to get paid up front, number one, you have to be confident about it. Number two, it helps if you have a track record. When I ask to get paid up front, people see that I've read for these publications. They see my best-selling books. They see me on this YouTube channel. They're like, oh, okay, he's not gonna take the money and run. But most importantly, if you're able to get that credibility through your confidence, through your work ethic, even getting a cosign, if you're connected to somebody else and someone else in your network says, yes, Damon's good for that money, offer them something. When I do major speaking engagements, when I have major projects, often what I'll do is actually apply a discount. So I'll say, you can go ahead and pay half up front and half when the project is done. Or you can pay the whole thing up front and save 5%. Now that might sound crazy when you're talking about 4 figures, even 5-figure projects. That 5% could represent 1,000 or two. So you are gonna eat a little bit of that. But if you think of on a grand economic scale, as far as what else you can do with that money, the opportunity cost of you not having that money, etc. Even as far as the peace of mind of knowing that you've already been paid for this project. So you don't have to hunt people down to invoice them. Not to mention security as far as knowing that you've been paid. And so if they disappear or if there's issues, they're less likely to do that. Number 3, this is the biggie. I think that's the most important thing, is not having a contract at all. Number 3, you need to have a contract. If you're listening to the music right now, it's from Purple Fluorite. Awesome producer, love their music. We go way back. My mug, Bring Your Worth. It's available at damonbrown.com. Sorry, damonbrown.net. I don't even know my website. It's available at damonbrown.net. It's a collaboration between my cover designer of all my independent books, Beck Loss, shout out to Beck, and my partner, my wife, who is very crafty, and me, because I designed it. So we split the money every time y'all buy one of these mugs. The trailer video, if you've seen my speaker reel, it's done by Neha Tawari, who's actually the founder of Version Consulting. She designed the whole thing. Her and I go way back. Every single one of these instances are people that I know intimately, such as my wife, people who I go way back with, like Purple Fluorite, or people that I've known for several years, like Version Consulting. All these instances, we had contracts. We had signed contracts, or at minimum, we had emails saying, this is how we're going to distribute things. When someone buys a mug, this is how it's going to be spread out among us. This is going to be the profit, this is the cost. All of them respected it because I respect them as a business person. This is important for several different reasons, which is actually so many reasons I can't even get into all of them with the video. The top 2 reasons. Number 1, relationships change. There's people that I've started businesses with, there's people that I've connected with. For some of them, we're cool. For some of them, we were cool before we did the project and then we haven't spoken in years. But our money from our royalties still come to the right address. Things are still split up correctly. Often we'll say we'll do a handshake or we'll write it on some random napkin. We'll do that based on the relationship we have right now. But relationships, all of them evolve. And there might be people that you collaborate with, that you work for, that you might not even get along with in the future, or you realize how they really are as far as how they work, and you realize you don't want to work with them anymore. Or, this happens often, if you end up being like myself, you do a lot of independent work, the person that you report to, they suddenly leave, or they're let go, or the department shift and they end up being promoted. And suddenly you have a new point of contact. But your old point of contact is the person that knew the contract, that knew how much you're supposed to have, that knew what kind of rights it was, whether it was work for hire, first run rights, as we say in journals and whatever. They knew all the information. That info is gone. Now, if you're lucky, they can pass on that info to the next person. But the next person ultimately is in charge. I've been a journalist, a creator, independent freelancer for decades now. There's so many times where I've had a solid lock into a particular organization or culture, and that person suddenly left, and they have to build that over again. One of the things you can't build over again is a contract. That's number 1. So it's the relationship part of it. But number 2, why you should absolutely have a contract is that there's no reason why you should keep all this stuff in your head. I created these mugs with my 2 partners about 4 years ago when Bring Your Worth came out. Shout out to y'all who have supported it all this time. Do I remember the percentages? I've done like 4 books since then, so I guess I can probably spout them, but I don't have to. And neither do my 2 partners in creating these mugs or this t-shirt for Bring Your Worth. Sorry, Build From Now.
my Built From Now t-shirt. They don't need to do that. It's already written. So it's not that like I'm getting of old age. It's not that other people aren't reliable. It's not that, we have these bad memories. It's just this one less thing you have to worry about. So since I've done the Bring Your Worth mug, I've done these t-shirts, I've done other work, those things pile up over time. Right now I have a few dozen passive income sources. Each of them have their own percentages, including the mugs and the t-shirts and other work that I do. I don't need to keep it up here. And I don't even say, God forbid, that day when I'm gone, happens to everybody. You don't get out of here alive. Those contracts are in place. Those flows are in place. Those systems are in place as much as possible to actually get it to the right people so that that percentage that I get from my passive income sources, including Inc. magazine, including the work that I'm doing with the mug, including the stuff I'm doing for major organizations, those will flow into my bank account. They'll flow into the correct properties because those contracts and those systems are in place. That is part of creating a legacy. So it's something that no one else has to worry about. It's not about when times are quote unquote good. And it's not about when times are static. It's about times changing. And the secret is that things always change. The partnerships that I have, including the ones I talked about, even the one with my wife, they've evolved rapidly over the years. And so why shouldn't things be put in place so that things can evolve from that? And it might be that some of the contracts that you create have to be updated. And that's okay too. But you need some type of foundation to create from. So as you dive into your creativity and get into the business of what really inspires you, you will absolutely sleep better. You'll have a better career. And frankly, you'll be a lot safer and secure if you create a foundation based on the business of the business. And that foundation is based on good contracts.
Not worth anything is bull. If you have 50% with a conglomerate, with a partner who will push you to the next level, that's worth more than 100% of nothing.
Being independent is fantastic, but sometimes partnering with other people allows you to do a bigger impact and frankly to make the pie bigger so everybody gets a chance. Today we're going to talk about co-founders. I've had a couple, and how do you negotiate and get a good co-founder agreement? This is a contentious territory because so many things that we create, particularly as solopreneurs or side hustlers, we came up with it in our own brain, or we were chatting with some friends and we came up with a great idea. Those things have happened to me several times. Some of them you will never hear of, but other things became Cuddler, became, the Bites as Entrepreneur, became So Quotable, became these things that I became known for. How you negotiate and how you navigate co-foundership is worthy of talking about a lot. And it's some territories where you need a co-founder, you need that support. But sometimes we can be afraid of bringing on co-founders because we don't want to lose what we got, or we don't trust people in that way, or we're afraid to frankly share some of that power. As I talk about in Built From Now, there's people that I've coached in the past who didn't want a co-founder because they didn't want to share the power, but then they end up not getting anywhere because they didn't have enough power themselves. So we're going to talk about two big things that you want to think about as you bring in co-founders and as you work towards this. There's by no means exhaustive. I'm not going to get into legal advice. There's so much stuff. Please get a lawyer if you do decide to get into the co-founder game. But with that said, I think there's two big things you want to think about as you bring on a co-founder. Number one is that every single agreement is finite. I love Seth Godin. I love Seth Godin in general, but I love his argument and discussion about this. He says that every co-founder agreement, as in the contract, whether it's on a napkin, as we saw, I believe it was Facebook had their stuff on a napkin. It's on a napkin, or it's legally drawn up, as it was in the case of working with my lawyer with some of the intellectual properties that I've worked with. It's still binding. All of them are finite. And I love Seth's take on this. Seth's take on this. I promise it's not a toke. Seth Godin's take on this. He says all of them are finite for two reasons. One of the founders decides to leave or passes away. And founders are bought out sometimes, where they figure out how much this company or idea is worth. And then
The remaining founder or founders pay the other founder, and the other founder leaves with their cut, right? They leave or they pass away, natural attrition, if you want to be PC about it. So they leave, or as was the case with me, the business itself is bought and they're no longer founders. My last startup was called Cuddler. It connected people for hugs. It's the startup that I'm most known for. It came out in 2014, and we sold it in 2015. So it got really popular really quickly. We bootstrapped it. So when people wanted to acquire us, companies wanted to acquire us, it was just a matter of us divvying up whatever profit price they were offering and then splitting it 3 ways, because I had 2 other co-founders, and going our separate ways. Relatively clean. But how we split up and what we owned as far as the startup, that discussion happened right after we launched. So the 2 co-founders were already involved. I became a 3rd co-founder a little bit later on, but before we had launched, and I ended up being the COO and the CMO essentially. And I ended up guiding the launch. So I came on fairly early, but I wasn't the original co-founder. We did it. That first week, we had 100,000 users and 10,000 people who completed Cuddles, which was the impetus of the app, which was similar to Tinder and Grindr. So with us doing that, we realized, all of us realized, it was going to get big really quickly. It was already big. It had been out for a week. Literally, we had 100,000 users. It was crazy. So we started talking. I initiated the conversation. I'm like, listen, we need to figure out how we're going to split this up. Now, we could have had the discussion earlier, which might have been a little cleaner, but it still wasn't popular enough so that it was an issue. And it still wasn't making money like that, which makes it even more contentious when a lot of money gets involved. So we spent about 3 weeks to a month negotiating what parts we owned. Some back and forth, not too heated, but it was definitely some discussions. And then we were like, cool, Charlie owns this part, then this part goes over here, blah, blah, blah. Damon owns this part. No problem. We already had that in writing a month after we launched. 6 months later, the acquisition calls started coming in. What wasn't contentious is what we owned. And so when we got to a dollar amount that sounded good and we sold the company, it's like, all right, the agent that represented us gave us a separate checks based on the contract and the agreement that we had done months earlier. But imagine if we hadn't done that and then money gets into the picture. I used to live in Silicon Valley. I've heard the horror stories from the lawyers that I've worked with to people who have had their own startup tragedies, for lack of a better term. And people end up being in court for years, trying to get stuff sorted. I love Seth's advice in this. Whatever commitment you make to a co-founder, it's going to be finite. It'll eventually end. Your company will shut down or get acquired, or one or both of you will decide not to do this anymore, whether on purpose or one of you leaves, you guys agree not to do it anymore, or one of you passes away. That's just the deal. It's kind of like a marriage. You think about marriage, that's a co-foundership. I've had both, right? Trust me, they're way more similar than most of us give credit for. So number one, remember that every co-founder agreement is finite. Eventually, you're going to be playing End of the Road by Boys to Men, just like my high school prom. It's going to happen, right? So number one, everything is finite. Number two, realize that that contract's only going to come up when you have a problem. If you guys are cool, just like a marriage, if you guys are cool, you're not looking at how you're going to split up the assets because you don't think you're going to split things up, right? You're not going to be looking at the co-founder agreement when everything's rosy and you guys are both or all of you, because I had 3 co-founders in the past, all of you are rosy in the business. No, you're going to look when there's trouble. Gary Keller talks about this. He was on the Tim Ferriss podcast. He says your agreements should be called disagreements because you only read them when you disagree with something. Had to write it down. Brilliant. Now, Gary Keller is the co-founder of Keller Williams. If you're in the home business at all, if you bought a home like I have, or if you're in any other residential neighborhood, you've heard of Keller Williams. So he's been through it. He talks about it on the podcast, really good podcast, about some of his adventures and issues that he had with the co-founder and other co-founders, obviously the Williams and Keller Williams. But this is brilliant. The point is that you're going to have issues eventually, and that's when the contract is going to come up. You need to view it as something that's going to make those potential issues in the future clear. One of my favorite adages is that the best medicine man in the village isn't well known and doesn't have the notoriety because his patients always feel better. His patients are never sick. He does the proactive stuff. The ones that you hear about, the ones that have the reputation, they happen to occur because they're more reactive, or whatever they tried to do didn't work. The best known things, to quote Dan Heath in Upstream, one of my favorite books right now, is that the upstream work, the work that you do proactively, it doesn't get the credit. A good co-founder contract, it doesn't get the credit. You might not even think it's a good contract because the stuff that's in there already saw ahead, already had the vision of the issues that you and your co-founder will have. So the best co-founder contracts, you don't have to pull them out because you already negotiated it, right? With Cutler and some of my other contracts, we already saw how things could split apart. We already, again, with Cutler, we already split up the shares. So if one of us wanted to leave, we knew the other two needed to buy this person out. That was already discussed. It's clarity. The best contractual agreements don't have to be pulled out because you guys already talked about stuff. So when there's rocky seas, and there's always rocky seas when it comes to partnerships, that's just the game of life, then you'll be able to look at that and say, oh yeah, we already talked about that. If we take this route, we'll do this decision. Done. Do that before you make that full commitment. Otherwise, when it gets to that finite part, when it gets to a disagreement, that's going to be way messier than it needs to be. And unfortunately, the person that's going to be paid the most, as they always say, are the lawyers. If you want more insight as far as how to negotiate these types of things, I think it actually pours into emotional intelligence. Us having the emotional intelligence to say, this partnership may not last forever. There might be a point where we'll disagree on something. It's taking the rose-colored glasses off. There's a great playlist that I have with about a dozen or so videos. It's featuring Brene Brown and other folks talking about emotional intelligence. That's what we're really talking about in this video. I highly recommend you check out the playlist. Again, it's about a dozen videos. They're each about 10 minutes long. It's Brene, it's Oprah, it's a lot of one-name people. I think Simon Sinek's in there. It's called Sinek, is in there. Be sure and check it out. If you're liking the content, be sure and throw a like, share it with other folks, and subscribe. It is free, and it's every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 11:30 a.m. Vegas time. And I'd love to give you more insight about being a solopreneur, a side hustler, and your best self in the business community. And until next time, remember to bring your worth, and that you can always build from now. Take care.